Catus Maximus here, this time with a review and comparison of the Harbor Freight Icon Speed Collar Roto-Grip extension versus the Napa Professional Roto-Grip extension. I call these Roto-Grips because this is what I know them as. They're also known as spinning handle extensions, spinning collar extensions, speed handle, various different things. This Harbor Freight's $20 on sale. I believe its normal shelf price is only like 25 bucks or something like that. I didn't double check, but it is still on sale for 20 bucks. This little guy from Napa is normally like $35, $36, and this is just for the 3/8 version. However, they have a 20% off right now if you have a AAA membership, so that's why I went ahead and picked this up. It ended up being about 28 bucks. So there's about 50 reviews on Harbor Freight's website. A lot of people really love this Icon extension. They really talk about how smooth it runs, and I kind of thought that was a little bit amusing because this Napa actually is true dual ball bearing in a captured E-clip system. There's a big difference between ball bearings and this. So we can already tell by the sound. So the idea behind these is just simple. When you're trying to use an extension, and you can actually remove the collar on the Harbor Freight, there are many times or many situations, say when you have an impact wrench on it. Impact wrenches are always special. There we go. Where you're trying to get at some type of fastener, you're in a kind of an awkward situation. You may have a larger socket, so you want to hold the extension itself to give you a bit better control. But obviously when you operate the tool, the extension is spinning in your hand. If you're wearing like nitrile gloves or anything like that, they tend to want to get caught and wrapped around. And so that was the big idea with these type of collared extensions, is now you have some type of collar here that will spin around, and so you can actually hold the tool and operate it. But the main point of this review is that the Harbor Freight Icon is reasonable for the $20 that they're charging on sale for a half-inch version. But there actually is, for not a whole lot more money, ones that are much better. Now, even though, and also this thing is rebranded at Home Depot under Husky, so tool manufacturer consolidation is now getting a little bit crazy because everybody's selling the same damn tool under different names, which I guess is the way it's always been, but it seems to be just getting a little bit excessive now. Now, both of these are made in Taiwan. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. So the way the Husky works, they actually have a couple undercuts. So the idea is you can have a couple handle positions. That can be an issue in some situations because obviously if a variety of not just pulling your lug nuts off in your driveway. If you're using this industrially, you're working on equipment or anything, you're in awkward positions, you try to lift up the impact wrench, or in the middle of working with it, you can end up just hitting that collar and the whole thing. And that could be a little bit frustrating when you're trying to maybe use this overhead. And that's the biggest point, is then you can hold it and actually help support a lot of the weight of the tool. You accidentally hit that collar, the tool's going to fall, it's going to knock the socket off at the same time, and it's going to be an amusing situation. The second thing about the ball bearing operation of this Icon is it's more like an air fitting, and that's how it's working. There are two bearing balls down in there, but they are not ball bearing. Those are bearing balls. There is no ball bearings that actually run in races inside this. It's just a little collar. Those little balls kind of roll around in that little aluminum socket or holders that they're in. The way those bearings are held is because they just drill a hole and they just stop just before they get through, and there's a little lip. And so on an impact tool, those little holes can end up wallowing out because this is just aluminum, and you may have an issue down the road with them falling out. And I'm surprised they only use 2 instead of something like 3 or 4 or even more. Exacerbating the issue is when you're in operation and you're actually putting a load on this collar, that's just causing those ball bearings to just roll around in those basically the little sockets that they're in, and further grinding them out. Since this is an impact tool, you're knocking all sorts of stuff and dust in there, so that gives abrasives. Really not what I consider a long-term industrial design. And that's really why I wanted to blab about. It's pretty nice for 20 bucks, but that's it. is a $20 tool. And in another review, and I just was noticing here, is this whole collar is actually two-piece threaded, and the secret seam is right there at the top. And some people have had issues with it coming unthreaded and having it fall apart. Harbor Freight, did of course warranty it, but nonetheless, you can actually see the difference in tone from this upper separate piece from the lower piece. Anyway, the Napa is a lot better because you have two captured ball bearings. They actually do a little machine step on this extension, so the bearings are perfect. This has just a tiny bit of play. It is a patented design. They use heavy-duty steel washers on each side of the ball bearing. That helps provide reinforcing. This is an aluminum collar, so obviously as this gets beat up, it will kind of want to deform it, and if it was just relying on the relatively small ball bearing in there, it would kind of upset the shape of the race and cause it to not spin very smoothly. So they're using these washers just to help give some reinforcement in there. This is nice quality. They do have some pretty nice knurling on this, is what you would expect. And Napa now has this NPT, Napa Professional Tools. And, they seem okay. They're definitely better than the Everlast. I think they're about the same grade as the Carlisle. I don't know if there's Carlisle or if they're doing the MPT for the impact side and then Carlisle for all the hand tool side. So anyway, this thing is beautiful. It spins just perfectly. And so something like this, you don't have to worry about falling apart. It's going to last forever. And if you have any issues with the ball bearings, they're it'll cost you $5 to replace them both. And you only need a snap ring pliers. They're not pressed on, and I'll show that in a second here. And you really notice using one that actually has the ball bearings in it, because when you put a lot of pressure on the collar, there's just, you don't feel any difference in the amount of resistance. There just is no difference. Where this one, if you really are pressing, then you can really feel it, and it feels a bit gritty and crunchy, and it just due to the way it's designed. You're just basically, it's the same thing as having like a round impact bit in your impact driver, and you're just spinning it around on a little ball bearing that normally just acts as a bit retainer. These things are super handy. I should mention that this is 10 inches. The Napa, I believe, is a 8-inch, or excuse me, a 6-inch. Is so many situations where you have a flex head, and there's locking flex heads. I just did a review, but there's many situations where it's nice just to have a collar that you can grab and just hold the darn tool onto the fastener, and now you can just freely operate the flex head. If you have a situation where you have to like flex up and down around stuff to get a bigger ratchet sweep, it just makes it a beautiful situation. It's actually really surprising. It's much better than holding onto the top of the ratchet, because you're kind of pressing your hand versus just having a nice full grip. It's actually a pleasurable experience. So anyway, let me just pop the snap ring out of this, and we'll show you what I mean inside here. It's actually super easy to maintain these, because you just have one little snap ring. Always wear safety glasses with snap rings because they can snap. The other trick to snap rings is you don't want to like overexpand them. You only expand them just enough to get them past or unseated. And you don't want to do any more than that. Otherwise, they tend to want to bend and stretch and don't reseat back down. And literally, you just pull off the snap ring, and just the whole assembly comes out. And see, there isn't the same type of undercuts. It's a machined extension, but it's a very light amount of machining. Harbor Freight advertises this extension as taking 295 foot-pounds of torque, which I was actually pretty surprised for the half-inch, and surprised that they advertised the torque value. I believe the Napa would be equivalent, but this thing right here is just great. There's our, and you can literally just pop it out. There's just two washers and this thin bearing, and what I thought was interesting here, if I can get this thing to pop out, was how they did that, where they just took these extra thick washers and sandwiched the bearing. I think that's a good idea. I was checking, and these two washers are just a little bit thinner than the bearings that they're using, so you're not going to be able to buy extra bearings. You actually could. You could measure the thickness of all this and then find a bearing that's the same diameter but just a little bit thinner, and actually upgrade it to dual bearings on each side, or quad bearings total. And I think that's kind of neat about this tool, is you can do a little upgrade. And this thing has another distinct advantage. There's actually a little space between the shaft and then the shell there, and it's like a little secret storage compartment. You could also upgrade this with rubber sealed ball bearings. That might not be a bad idea. Anyway, I think for 20 bucks for a half-inch extension, the Icon is great, especially if you don't have a long impact half-inch extension. Then for 20 bucks, it's really no-brainer because you do get this extra feature. But really, when you step up to a true ball bearing version of one of these tools, you'll never look back. Anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.